Hi guys, welcome back. This reading month was some good, some great, some very bad. Let's get into it. I have the Penguin Little Black Classics box set and just randomly pick one to read occasionally, so I started the year with reading the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. And for being written in the 19th century, this slaps. It's very powerful with lines like, "The proletarians have nothing to lose but their chains. They have a world to win. Working men of the world, unite." The idea that the middle class is basically the assistant to the regional manager, pointing out that the communist movement is the only one that serves the majority in the interests of the majority, while all other ideals serve and are in the interests of the minority. Understatement here, I'm aware, but this manifesto is so well written and laid out and still raises relevant ideas and questions. I absolutely recommend reading this if you never have, and rereading this if it's been a while, especially in our current era of anti-capitalist proclivities. Having said all this, and having found this so energizing and valuable, I found myself ultimately questioning whether I'm really railing against our capitalist society, or if my ire is actually against racism and patriarchy and general human evil. Just as it's impossible to separate those factors from capitalism, it's impossible to be Marxist or communist today, living anywhere on planet Earth where capitalism abounds and is generally embraced. Hierarchical society is a natural state. I don't know how best to attain a utopian society, but I'm guessing the key is finding balance and furthering equity regardless of which political system we choose to abide by. I read a lot of Melissa Broder last year and fell in love with her writing and her heart. This month I read When You Say One Thing But Mean Your Mother, which is a beautiful collection of poems that came out in 2010, and Superdoom, which is a recent publication of selections from all of her collections of poetry. If you're a fangirl like me, then obviously I'd recommend getting whatever Broder slaps her name on. Otherwise, I'd say this isn't your typical book of poetry. I love the way Broder plays and explores with the words, the syntax, the visuals, and how it all aligns with the particular brand of who Broder is. She's who I imagine this generation's Carrie Bradshaw-esque sex and relationships writer would be. Our boots on the ground, if you like, in our cynical romance culture. Put dinner in a locket, then sniff to get to clavicle heaven. You want to call her darling, but your lips grow foreskin, thick as pomegranate casing. When I purge the abscess of a girlhood, I am heavier a female. The humans said I was born milk, but then grown-ups poured in lemon juice, which makes sense because I've always felt like rotten cheese, and I've been running around the planet like I don't want to be this, when in fact I am milk, and was always milk, and will always be milk. I long for the day I can spontaneously recite, "I look to the shit doors for love because they glitter. Oh, the glittery shit, so much more magnetic than what I have inside me." Speaking of Carrie Bradshaw, I have been enamored with the show and Just Like That, and belong to the apparently small group of people who find the writing great. One of the writers of the show is Samantha Irby, whose work I've never read before, so I ran out to buy and read Meaty and Wow, No Thank You, both of which I greatly enjoyed, giggling maniacally at every page, at the visual of her getting ready to go out, but while her friends are on their final touches, she's busy exercising whatever demon possessed her to buy a fitted satin skirt, and looking up all the songs that she'd feature on her mixtapes to best encapsulate her persona for whoever prospective date she was trying to impress. Fortunately, here in Southern California in the middle of January, we still got some 70-degree sunny days. So before it gets to be full on 85 and sweltering next month, I decided to read Wintering, The Power of Rest and Retreat in Difficult Times by Katherine May. And this is indeed an incredibly cozy, wintry book. It's kind of literally about winter with lots of very interesting historical and factual bits about winter. Like how people in Finland sanitize their laundry by sticking it outside to freeze. Before the industrial age, people had 2 separate night times where they'd sleep after working, then wake up and have a quiet, contemplative few hours to think or to fornicate, then sleeping again until morning. Unfortunately, I didn't particularly take to May's voice, and the book toggles between these factual bits with her personal life, and I couldn't help myself from being judgmental. I did enjoy reading this, though, and do intend to reread during cold winter months. Same cold vibes with Elisa, Shua, Dusapin's Winter and Sokcho, which, to be honest, I bought mostly for this stunning cover and because I try to support Korean writers by purchasing their work. Unfortunately, I didn't really connect with it. The atmosphere is extremely wintry and frozen. The protagonist is cold and detached, but her desire is still there to be seen and be wanted. The setting of the deteriorating guest house and the rugged outdoor fish market were palpable, but I just didn't find any of the characters particularly interesting. The gruff Frenchman wasn't enigmatic for me. I just felt cold throughout the entirety of this reading experience. Reading Elena Ferrante's Frantumaglia was the equivalence of watching and enjoying the hours-long behind-the-scenes footage of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. The book is compiled of correspondence and interview articles over the past few decades because, if you don't know, Elena Ferrante is a pseudonym, and the author herself insists on hiding her personal identity because her writing should be enough. Her books are independent beings upon publishing, no longer needing its mother to embarrass it out in public, and she wishes to secure her privacy. So from the get-go and on the page of every book of hers, you get a sense of who she is as a writer, as a person, and Frantumaglia cements the idea I have of her, a woman who wails against the patriarchy, who's deeply impacted by her childhood, her motherhood, her identity. And it was a pleasure to read her opinions, her explanations of things, like why so many characters are named Elena, why there are similar plot veins throughout her books, how much her classics educational background informs her. She describes the term Frantumaglia as the part of us that escapes any reduction to words or other shapes, and that in moments of crisis dissolves the entire order within which it seemed to us we were stably inserted. Every interior state is, ultimately, a magma that clashes with self-control, and it's that magma we have to try to describe if we want the page to have energy. It's a word her mother used to describe the bits and pieces whose origin is difficult to pinpoint and which make a noise in your head, sometimes causing discomfort. Needless to say, I only recommend this if you're a hardcore Ferrante fan, but I loved it. I wish I could say I liked Oh Beautiful by Jung Yun, but unfortunately, I didn't like it at all. I appreciated the very real world of the story describing the Bakken oil boom in North Dakota, but ultimately the book was trying to be too much at once, and the writing did not help. The judgmental voice of the author blended with the disagreeable voice of the protagonist, and this book's ultimate sin is taking itself too seriously, imperiously waving its stick of righteous indignation and pointing it towards the direction of basically the plot of the film Wind River, starring Jeremy Renner and Elizabeth Olsen, which is very good and I highly recommend you watch. Finally, I was surprisingly delighted by Wendell Berry's Why I Am Not Going to Buy a Computer. I find these little penguin books to be great brain snacks, and this one raised some excellent points. I've never read anything by Berry, but if I find any of his work in independent used bookstores, I'd definitely be interested in reading. But the general impression I get from him is that he's an ultra-progressive fuddy-duddy who's probably incredibly annoyed and concerned for the state of the world today, as the two essays in this book were written in 1987 and 1990. If the use of a computer is a new idea, then a newer idea is not to use one. These men are helpless to do anything without money, and so for money, they do whatever they are told. I feel like January was a long month and I wanted to ease into it lightly, which I feel I did with this particular variety of books. I'm ready for an emotionally impactful February. Hope you're all staying warm and safe. Until next time.